Well, look, we have our own discussions with President Xi of China, and he wants to get along also, and he's looking to get along, and we're looking to get along with him. And we will. We have a problem of trade where we have a very big imbalance with China. With Russia, we don't have that much trade, and they'd like to, and we'd like to also. They have some very valuable things for us, including very big forms of rare earth. They have a lot of earth. You know, they have a big chunk of real estate, the biggest, actually the biggest in the world for a country by far. And on that, they have things that we could use, frankly, and that other people could use. I think that President Xi would like to get along, and I think Russia wants to get along with the United States. I also think we're a much different country than we were just a few months ago.
A global political realignment is underway, one that was unimaginable just months ago. That was President Trump speaking with Laura Ingraham after his 2-hour meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, confirming that it is indeed his intent to pursue direct trade agreements with the Russian Federation. Now, that bombshell revelation comes on the heels of Trump's own assessment of his meeting. He wrote on Truth Social, quote, "My phone conversation today with President Putin of Russia was a very good and productive one. We agreed to an immediate ceasefire on all energy and infrastructure with an understanding that we'll be working quickly to have a complete ceasefire and ultimately an end to this very horrible war between Russia and Ukraine. This war would never have been started if I were president. Many elements of a contract for peace were discussed, including the fact that thousands of soldiers are being killed, and both President Putin and President Zelensky would like to see it end. That process is now in full force and effect, and we will hopefully, for the sake of humanity, get the job done." Now, the Kremlin produced their own readout from the meeting, confirming that the two leaders spoke about a suggested 30-day ceasefire, a prisoner exchange, and a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. With Putin responding positively to Trump's proposals, both leaders expressed interest in normalizing U.S.-Russia relations, agreeing to continued discussions on global security, economic cooperation, and even cultural exchanges like U.S. and Russian hockey matches, which will be awesome. However, the Russian readout made it absolutely clear, quote, "It was emphasized that the key condition for preventing the escalation of the conflict and working towards its resolution by political and diplomatic means should be a complete cessation of foreign military assistance and the provision of intelligence information to Kiev." In other words, Russia is drawing a very hard line that there will be no complete ceasefire until the U.S. and NATO agree to stop arming and supplying Ukraine, period, full stop. And of course, on top of that, there was no discussion as to whether so much as an inch of land occupied by Russia is going to be returned. We've interviewed Colonel Douglas McGregor several times on this channel, and he's noted that the Russian front lines in Ukraine are the single most fortified lines on the planet. There is no way those lines are going to be compromised, and Trump seems to get that. He has stated repeatedly that as far as he is concerned, the 20% of Ukraine that Russia has annexed is permanently gone. That is now a permanent part of the Russian Federation. Now, concessions like that have provoked the scorn and scoffing of a number of European officials who appear hell-bent on starting World War III. Germany's irrelevant defense minister, who oversees a military force of no more than 60,000, has called the meeting a, quote, flop. And he went on to excoriate Trump for boxing out the Europeans from these negotiations. Now, unfortunately for this, again, ridiculously irrelevant, inconsequential defense minister, I don't think he recognizes the new political order that's rising today in our world. Now, someone who clearly does is the renowned Russian geopolitical theorist Alexander Dugin. Here's what he had to say to CNN about the emerging Trump-Putin realignment.
So there's a lot of people, obviously, in the West who believe and fear that President Trump is closer ideologically and politically to Vladimir Putin than he is to his Western allies. What do you think?
Yes, it's so. I agree. That is obvious. That is obvious. He is much more conservative. He is in favor of traditional values. He is in favor of the patriotism of the nation. And I define that as the great powers world order. Putin and Trump coincide in accepting this model instead of liberal globalism.
Are you finding that allergies are turning your nights into a nightmare? Well, meet Sambrosa's Sweet Dreams Night Syrup. This is your ticket to a sleep paradise. This isn't just any syrup. It's a unique blend of pure natural honey, soothing organic herbs, and a touch of doxylamine, a trusted antihistamine that tackles those pesky nighttime symptoms. Whether it's sneezing, congestion, or itchy eyes keeping you up, Sambrosa's got you covered. Take it before bed and let its gentle formula help you drift off and stay asleep. This stuff is amazing. Wake up feeling refreshed, not groggy, and the best part, it starts at just $11.99. No prescriptions, no hassle, just natural relief. Visit the link below and use code Turley for 25% off and finally enjoy the sleep you deserve. Click on that link below right now. Now, what Professor Dugan is talking about there is the rise of what he calls great power blocks, where world order is increasingly being reorganized around civilizational cores. So we talk a lot about this channel and the rise of what scholars are calling civilization states, such as we're seeing with a renewed Orthodox Russia and a Confucian China and Hindu nationalist India and Neo-Ottoman Turkey, Shiite Iran, Sunni Saudi Arabia. And the key with civilization states is that they are, in effect, worlds within the world. They're worlds within the world. So these are nations that are redrawing their boundaries around ancient civilizational spheres that are not limited to the modern nation state. Instead, a civilization state becomes a power center for the whole of a wider common culture. Harvard scholar Sam Huntington called them core states. So he predicted this in the early 90s. He recognized that the 21st century would be the century of great power blocks rising up as civilizational centers for their own respective cultural and religious spheres. That's what I mean by worlds within a world. So you would have an Orthodox sphere, you'd have a Sino-sphere, you'd have an Hindu sphere, you'd have an Islamic sphere. In other words, world order will no longer be governed by a one-size-fits-all political and economic globalism as it has been over the last 3 decades. Those days are done. Instead, with the rise of religion and nationalism as the most powerful forces in international politics, we're now seeing a world order reorganized around particular spheres of civilizational self-containment, each of which has a dominant or leading core power that plays the key role in shaping the identity and influence of that civilization. And so the key here is that the civilization state isn't simply an inward development that's happening within a nation. It's also an outward development where a civilization state becomes the political core around which similar and smaller countries, what we might call satellite countries, revolve. And this is what Professor Dugan is calling great power politics. Increasingly, in this new political order that's rising, it's going to be these civilizationalist core states that are going to be tasked with the responsibility of negotiating directly and exclusively with each other. And those negotiations will have decisive implications for the respective smaller satellite countries. Hence why Europe is being left out of these talks. So with that in mind, what Trump appears to be fully recognizing here is that Russia fully believes that its special military operation in Ukraine is fundamentally about defending their civilizational sphere from a peer competitor, namely NATO and its incessant eastward expansion. There is not a hint in any of Putin's speeches ever that he even remotely wants to recreate the Soviet Union. That is not, he talks civilization. It's always been about defending Russia's civilizational hegemon from the incursion of a peer competitor. Trump is recognizing that. I think practically, Trump is recognizing the realities of the battlefield, where Russia has effectively won. Russia has conquered and annexed 20% of Ukraine, the Russian side of Ukraine, and has no intention whatsoever of ever reversing that. And as long as this conflict continues, Ukraine is only going to end up losing more territory. That's just baked into the cake. And that's been the calculus from day one of this special military operation. Again, for right or for wrong, it's irrelevant. And I think in these negotiations, President Trump has made that very clear. He's repeatedly said he thinks this eastern side of Ukraine is forever annexed, and he's not going to force Russia to make any kind of concessions there. So then that leads to the third, and I think the single most important part of these negotiations. President Trump appears far more focused on a far broader engagement with Russia, right? That's the importance of the talk about trade. In fact, Reuters is reporting that President Putin has just signed a decree unlocking ways for Western investors to trade Russian assets. This is what Trump is talking about at the very beginning there with Laura Ingraham, reestablishing trade and economic ties with Russia, sponsoring sports exhibitions with their hockey teams. Do you see what they're talking about? It's vitally important to realize what's happening here, because this is certainly not anything you're going to hear from the legacy media, that's for sure. Note the war in these negotiations between the United States and the Russian Federation. The war is not the central issue. You got to get that. The war is not the central issue, because it's not the central issue for Russia. The central issue is the reestablishment of political and economic ties between Washington and Moscow, which is central to great power global politics. If all you focus on is the war, if all you're focusing on is security guarantees, if all you're focusing on are concessions, you are totally misunderstanding what's happening here. You do not get what's unfolding before us. Trump and Putin are talking great power politics, and as such, they are awakening a great power world order. And that is the real significance of these meetings. Any future ceasefire is ultimately going to come about when that civilizational order is fully established. That is the world that is emerging. Frankly, that is the world that Putin is forcing. And that is what these talks are ultimately all about.
We will stand bravely, dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun.
Wow, it's such an exciting time to be alive. As we speak, America is regaining its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, and prosperous nation on earth. We have so much to celebrate already. Safer borders, the dismantling of DEI, permission to drill, baby, drill, and $1 trillion in new investments released into the economy. We stand on the precipice of what will be known as the most prosperous time in American history. The only question is, will you be an active participant in the golden age, or will you sit passively on the sidelines watching everyone else build wealth? If you want to be a part of the former, then I urge you to join me and my good friend Mark Wilburn at the Golden Age Summit on Thursday, March 20th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Mark is a stock market expert whose recent recommendations have led to returns of over 200%. He's an amazing teacher and has a knack of demystifying the market so everyday Americans can participate in this golden age we're now in. But don't wait. Seating registration is limited, so click on that link below right now and register today, and I'll see you for an event that promises to change your life.